A little while ago, I did a video about 5 types of reptiles that are kept very commonly and are popular in the hobby, and I don't necessarily think they should be for a myriad of reasons. And if you guys want to check that video, you can look at it right there. But in that list, I mentioned venomous snakes because they are unfortunately very prominent in parts of the country where they are legal to be kept. And I thought, as a better choice, or at least a more responsible, again in my opinion, choice, instead of keeping those venomous snakes, we pick a different type of snake as an alternative, and those would be the rear fang venomous snakes, where almost all of the ones in the hobby that are available to us do not give a medically significant bite. And so today I want to do 5 good choices of rear fang venomous snakes that can make very good pets that are probably a little bit more of a responsible choice as far as a pet reptile goes. Now, a couple caveats. Number one is that obviously here in Colorado, I can't really keep rear fang venomous as a whole. It's not really something we're really allowed to do. So we're going to be doing one of the ones where I'm showing a lot of other fun ones and things like that. And then number two is that these, just because I do, and with all of the other 5 lists that I do, these aren't necessarily the best ones or the top ones or the best beginner ones, but the ones that I think can make great reptile pets if you give enough experience and research and work into keeping them properly. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now the first one is probably the very first one that everyone thought about when I said rear fang venomous snakes, for a very obvious reason, and that is the hognose snake. Now, hognose snakes are one of the most popular pet snakes, not only in North America, in the United States, but around the world in general. They're amazing, amazing reptiles. Now, they get their name for a pretty obvious reason, is that really cute, pushed up, triangular shaped nose that is essentially used to help and aid with burrowing and digging, both for hiding themselves and for looking for food. There are quite a few different species of them found kind of all over the world, to be honest with you, but for this section I really want to talk about the ones found here in North America, and that really classifies to a couple different ones, mainly one genus, and that is the eastern hognose, the southern hognose, the Mexican hognose, and the western and or plains hognose. They're kind of exchanging vernacular. I'm not sure what the most up-to-date or correct one is, but we all know plains western. That's the one we're talking about. Now, these guys are amazing pets, as I said before. They're well known for their, cute little faces, the small, easily handling, the very small caging requirements, as well as for their really funny defense mechanism, which is playing possum or playing dead, where they'll roll over and fake dying. Now, these guys are really, really cool. They don't get very large, as I've mentioned before, females being larger than males in the most cases. They rarely exceed 2.5 feet long, so you don't need huge enclosures for them. Their care, particularly for the plains and westerns, they're very easy. As far as their actual care requirements go, they're very hardy, especially for captive-born animals. The easterns are a little bit more, tricky in there, but overall they're still very easy to care for. In the wild, and this is what one of the things can be a little difficult if you decide to breed them, is that they love to eat amphibians. They love to eat frogs and toads, and even sometimes salamanders and lizards and things. It varies on their prey variety depending on where they are and what species they are, but as a whole they all really love that. But captive animals, if you're looking to buy one as a pet, all do very well on a rodent diet, which makes them very easy to care for. Really cool snakes. There are the South American tricolor hognose that are really cool, but we're still kind of learning about them. They are gaining in popularity too, but not nearly as much as the North American varieties for, all the different morphs that the plains have, all the easterns. I'm not sure if easterns have any true morphs, but I know they do have varying phases of high color, of like reds and oranges and different ones in different patterns as well. Really cool species snake. I wish I got a chance to work with them more here, but so whenever I get a chance to talk about one of my favorite species of snakes, the hognose, I'm going to do so, and every chance I have to actually go play with one, I will also do that as well. The next one's been around for a while, but they haven't seemed super commonplace. But lately I've seen them pop up more and more every year, and that is the Barron's Racer. Now, when you first look at the Barron's Racer, you think that, oh, that looks a lot like the rhino rat snake. Well, there's a few differences. The first one is that the Barron's Racers, they're obviously the rear fang venomous snake, and they come from South America versus Southeast Asia like the rhino rats. And when you think about South America, you don't really think of the tropical snake. Like we're thinking like the boa constrictor and the rainbow boas and things like that. But the Barons racers actually come from this really interesting part of South America called the Chaco region, which is this little place. It's east of the Andes, south of the Amazon River basin, to where it's much more shifting in climate as far as temps and humidity go. All of the southern hemisphere is subject to a rainy and a dry season versus their winter and summer. They don't really have the full change like we have here in the States, and even in places like Europe, where we have kind of a summer, spring, winter, fall kind of a deal, and I know it's not in that order. But in the southern hemisphere, for the most part, it's kind of just winter and summer with a wet and a dry season. And in the winter, in this area, this Chaco region of South America, there's almost no precipitation in parts of their range that they occupy. This Chaco range are sometimes called the Chaco Plains. And the rest of the time, it's, it rains heavily and the plains do flood and all that other fun, changing things. And so when we think about caring for this species, there's the different things that we have to kind of keep in mind. And so looking at this animal, we see that, they're usually typically green, although they can be both blue and brown with varying degrees of expression of those colors. They have that really cute kind of protuberance on their nose. It's actually kind of flexible like the rhino rats. It's not solid bone. So it's funny, but supposedly there's a little bit of sexual dimorphism where the males are significantly larger. I shouldn't say significantly, but supposedly visibly you can tell the difference. Obviously, I don't work with them, so I couldn't for sure tell that. And all the research that I did, it was mostly anecdotal as such, so supposedly. They're also significantly larger than the rhino rats. The rhino rat snakes usually don't top out over 4 feet. These Barons racers, with females being larger, sometimes hit over 6 feet long. So that means we're thinking of much larger enclosures. These guys are a semi-arboreal snake. A lot of the times we see them up in trees, in branches, up on things, so we think that they're arboreal, very similar to the rhino rat snakes. However, just like the rhino rats, they're actually semi-arboreal. They will spend time on the ground, especially during times of, periods of brumation, when it, for instance, it gets very hot, or when there's very little precipitation and they need kind of burrow down and hunker down and lower their kind of body, lower down a little bit. So when we want to start keeping these animals, we have to think about both semi-arboreal, so lots of places to climb, lots of places to hide, and as we talked about, for a good chunk of the year, there's not a whole lot of precipitation. So keeping them in a very wet tropical environment isn't necessarily the best for them. However, multiple human hides, both hopefully would be really cool, both elevated and not, plenty of human hides for them to get into during their shed cycles and things like that would be very beneficial to this species. Now, all of the species that I listed on this, and there are plenty of other ones, these ones seem to be very reluctant to bite. They almost never really go for bites in general. And I should, really clarify, the rear-fanged venomous snakes. So what that means is that they don't actually have true fangs. They're not like a viper or an elapid where they have an actual venom gland that delivers consciously when they actually make a bite. These have an entirely different type of gland that does produce venom, but when they go to bite, it oozes down these back kind of grooved teeth that they have in the back of their mouths. Now, that's not to say that if they just kind of very quickly like, oh, I'm mad at you and I just kind of hit you accidentally, you'll be okay. They've evolved to be able to do small amounts of envenomation to help and aid in capturing their prey, but none of these have ever produced, well, for the starters, there's never been a recorded death of an envenomation of any of the species that I've listed today, unlike a lot of other, venomous or hot snakes, so we call them in the hobby. As well as most of the time, they are very mild reactions. And for the instance of the Barons racer, there was one where, this is again a very anecdotal, where someone was kind of munched on for a little while, and they had, soreness, tenderness, a little bit of raised up bruising on the actual bite of the site of the bite, as I stutter over that, and his arm was kind of stiff and a little painful for about a day. So that's the type of thing that we're talking about. We're not talking about needing to go to the hospital or anything like that. So that is something that we do need to talk about when keeping rear-fang venomous snakes, to where even with the hognose, we can't consider them true beginners because of that, albeit very reluctant and very rare bite. Those things can occur, and it does kind of vary on the individual and the length of time that the snake is on you for the varying severity of that bite. This one might be my favorite species of snake on this list, and it really does bum me out that I'll never really get a chance to legally be able to keep one, and that is the Moosa Arana. Now, the Moosa Arana is a huge colubrid snake. They're found in South America. They're very large, heavy-bodied colubrids that sometimes, in fact, are even mistakenly called Crebos or indigos where they're found. They're not related to Drymarchon at all, but they have a lot of the very same attributes that gives them that. So for starters, they're big. For the most part, they're all very solid black snakes like the indigos. They are very active. So we're talking, a 6 to 7, sometimes 8-foot snake with males being larger, just like the Drymarchon, that are active, moving around all during the day, just like the Crebos and indigos that are found in water, in trees, in plains, in rainforests, on the forest bed floor, just like them, and they eat everything just like the Drymarchon. In fact, these guys are very well documented snake eaters. One of their favorite prey items in the wild is bothrops, or the lancehead vipers. So the dreaded lancehead viper that we all think about when we think about South America, Central America, that's a particular prey item that they have, and they actually seem to have a certain amount of anti-venom or natural resistance to bothrops venom, as well as several other, like coral snakes and things like that found throughout their range in their blood that makes them much better predators to those vipers and other elapids. These guys are really, really cool species of snakes. As I said before, very large, which means we're talking large enclosures, plenty of full spectrum lighting, varied diets of, you can do fish, you can do different rodents, you can do lizards, you could do snakes, you could do all sorts of really cool stuff, which gives an amazing, healthy, varied diet, which isn't something that a lot of people are able to do with quite a few of the popular species of snakes. They also even have a pied form of that, to where it's not quite like a piebald ball python, but there are definitely a lot of like specklings and patches here and there that give it similar to like a corn snake, or maybe even like the pied black pines, or heck, there's even a pied Brazilian rainbow boa now, to where it's a lot more broken up and not as high expression as say like a high white ball python, but they're still really cool. Amazing snakes, very reluctant bite. I couldn't find a single recorded bite of a Moosa Arana anywhere in the States, and even a couple of Spanish and Portuguese articles that I was going through and trying to translate through with my very broken Portuguese and Spanish knowledge, that I couldn't find a single reported bite from a Moosa Arana. And I do know a couple people here in the United States personally that do work with them, and they love this species of snake. I would absolutely recommend, if you are able to keep them and that's the type of snake that you're interested into, I would love to be able to meet some of you guys if you work with them and be able to see that amazing, cool animal and go visit your facilities. This one is, I'm going to say, the most advanced level of keeping and husbandry requirements of any of these, and that is because of kind of how individualistic and how large this next species of snake can be. So this one, and I'm building this up, so maybe you guys can catch this before I say it, is one of the largest species of colubrids in the New World. They're up there with the Moosa Arana and the indigos and the Crebos, sometimes hitting 8 feet in length. This is the South American false water cobra. These guys are really cool. Now, they're called false water cobras for a couple reasons. Number one, they do like a lot of times to be found in swampy, very kind of watery areas, and in captivity they do love soaking. Regardless of how you're keeping them, if it's you're keeping them properly or not, they do like to spend time in the water. The next one is that they can hood up. Just like eastern hognoses and a little bit of the plains and westerns, they can hood, just like a real cobra as a defense mechanism. Theirs is a little bit more significant and it's a little bit better. However, they don't have the ability to raise up like a true elapid cobra can. They definitely stay more on the ground, but they will hiss and hood up a little bit and stretch out their necks to make themselves look more intimidating and imposing, but they're definitely not raising all the way up like an actual true cobra. And as well as that, their markings and coloration does look fairly reminiscent of other water cobras, although obviously we don't have water cobras in the New World. These guys actually have a pretty wide range in South America, basically east of the Andes, and then most of northern and central South America, from the very top part of Argentina, Paraguay area, all the way up into parts of Colombia and Venezuela and Brazil, places like that. As I said before, they do kind of like the more swampy areas. The water cobra, they do earn their name. Now, these guys are very well documented in people who are working with snake intelligence research and working with reptile behavioral studies. These snakes seem to be finding themselves at the center of a lot of that because they are very intelligent, active colubrids. They, as I said before, they're very large, sometimes upwards lengths of 8 feet long, but they almost act like little retics or blackhead pythons where they do remember things, they adapt to schedules very well, and they're very inquisitive. They're active during the day and they like to see what's going on and they like to watch and learn. And so that's why I think that they're often used in these studies and experiments to where they're being target trained, they're station training, so they will like go for the target, and this color target, this is for food, this color target, this is for stationing, this is the stationing platform for either a food reward, this is where they're eating, or all these other really cool things. That's what false water cobras are finding themselves a lot in doing so, which is really cool. Now that being said, this is a very large snake in general. So when we talk about large species of snakes, just the actual like mechanical damage of a bite can be very painful, like a large boa or a Burmese python or something like that. Just a bite from that, just a reactive leave me alone bite, can be something that we have to worry about. And then there's also the worry about the rear fanged venom of the false water cobra. There's never been even a recorded hospitalization from a false water cobra bite. I did find one anecdotal report of a worker who was working with them, and they had a false water cobra kind of munch on him for a little while before, like, he kind of let him let go and figure it out instead of trying to get it off. And supposedly he actually had a small period of paralysis, although there's never been any other case reporting even in partial paralysis or even at the place where they were bit. So it might have just been kind of in his head a little bit, or the shock of it all. But overall, there's never been any sort of significant venomation from a false water cobra. These guys are really cool. They do have several morphs, even like a lavender, and most recently they did, I can't remember if they found or if they produced a scaleless false water cobra, which seems super weird to me considering it's a scaleless animal that likes to spend time in water all the time. So that kind of freaks me out a little bit, to be completely honest with you, but I don't know enough about it to really give a full opinion on that matter. But really, really cool species of snake, an amazingly intelligent, large, to be respected animal that if that's something that you were interested in, that's something that, would be a really cool, viable option. I will like to admit again and reiterate a lot of these times, both with this case, the next one, and all species of reptiles and animals in general, they're all very individualized. They all have their own personalities and they all react differently. It's very difficult to entirely group entire species to one specific just like checklist of behavior. So specifically for the case of a false water cobra, there are plenty of them that are very placid, that you open up the cage, they come right out and say, hey, what's going on? Let's hang out. What are we doing? And other ones that can be very defensive, just like with boas, just like with retics, heck, just like with some of my ball pythons. Some of my most defensive reactive snakes are ball pythons. So that's just something to keep in mind before we talk about basic, just kind of behavioral checklists. The last one I've talked about in a couple other videos as well. I'm cheating just a little bit. And so this one is the Madagascar Hog Nose. Now, I mentioned before that there are South American tricolors and all the different ones in North America. There are 3 species of hognose that are found on the island of Madagascar. And they are called, and there are 3 of them. There's the speckled, the golden, and the giant. All of them are larger and longer than any of the ones found in North America, but the giant ones are the giant for a reason. They can sometimes reach lengths of 6 feet long, so a huge snake. Now, on the island of Madagascar, usually the very first thing people think of is King Julian and the lemurs, sometimes Dumerul's boas. But another big thing, a lot of people think about it, is deforestation, habitat loss, and endangered species. So much habitat has been lost on the island of Madagascar. And reptiles specifically end up being forgotten in a lot of those conversations. But a lot of their snake species are very, very pressured and threatened and endangered right now. But the hognose seems to be one of the species that is actually doing pretty well. And that is probably because they can kind of live everywhere. Their range between the 3 species basically spans the entire island. They can be found in the arid, dry, desert regions. They can be found in habitated areas. They can be found in savannas, in parks, in the rainforests, everywhere. And they do very well. So despite the fact that pretty much all snakes on the island are killed by the natives and the inhabitants of the island, they seem to be doing pretty well. Now, these guys share a lot of the very same attributes, traits, and care requirements even of a lot of the other hognose species. I will say that these guys they will also hood up as well, but there's, as far as I know, no one's ever managed to get a Madagascar giant hognose who actually play dead, like the Easterns and the Plains are very well known for. They don't really seem to do it. This is actually one of the few species of rear-fang venomous that I've actually gotten to work with, other than like, Plains hognose and garter snakes. These guys, they're really, really cool, very placid animals, very chill. They're a lot more diurnal, so like a lot of the hognose that we have here, the Westerns and the Easterns and the Mexicans, they're more crepuscular. They definitely are active, and even if you were to go out and go herping and find them as well, that's usually when you find them, or at dawn and dusk, usually at dusk around those times when the frogs and the toads start to come out. These guys seem to be a little bit more kind of, all weather, all day kind of snakes, which is really, really cool. They do very well on a wide variety of diets. Most people still keep on rodents like most of us do, and they do very well like that. It's just a really cool species of snake that I honestly wish I could work with personally. I think I might love to be able to have, just like one or two little Plains hognose and then, the Madagascar giants. They're really cool. But again, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. I think that any of these species that I listed today, while need to be given proper care, respect, and research because of not only, hey, they're living, breathing animals, but there is that rear fang venomous, but again, much more mild, much less medically significant than a lot of other actual viper and elapid choices out there. Rear fang venomous snakes in general are a lot better to keep, with the exception of, obviously the boom sling. Like, that's a really bad one. And yes, the boom sling is a rear fang venomous colubrid. We don't like to mess with those. But for the most part, a lot of these snakes are amazing, amazing pet reptiles. Obviously, they're very individualistic. All of their care requirements are different from each other. And the level of essentially reptile keeping and husbandry knowledge does vary with those species from, the hognose all the way up to boega and the false water cobras. So that does vary in there, but hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. Heck, maybe I even mentioned a couple that nobody even knew about, and it's really cool to just go out and research on your own to see whether or not you, number one, can keep them, and then number two, if that's a species that you'd love to be able to keep. I have a whole playlist of other like top 5 videos that I've done, ranging from good pet reptiles, reptiles that are found in different areas, all sorts of fun stuff. If you want to check that out, you can learn a whole lot about all these other really cool species of snakes. You can check that out, not just snakes, but of all sorts of different animals in general. Hope you guys enjoyed this video today, and we'll check you next time.